Hello, this is Michael Tabb. We are in the month of August of 2018. Um, I am currently teaching character creation and development as well as writing for film and animation, basically screenwriting. We have a couple classmates and students who are writers in the class now here, and I just want to start by opening the floor up for questions. Does anybody have any questions about this week's assignments or just general questions about what we do, what we're learning, screenwriting, whatever?
Yeah, I have a question.
Great.
One of my first questions, I had some written down here. And actually, one just came to me. Damn it, forgot. I should have wrote it down right when I thought of it. Sorry. One of the questions I have is if you're writing horror, which I've noticed because I've read quite a few horror scripts.
Sure.
Um, I think it's said that it's important to kind of build to kind of write them a little differently because you're aiming, like when someone's reading the script, you're trying in essence to just not, I hate to use the word scare, but in a sense, yeah, you want them to feel like scared or feel it when they're reading your script. So I noticed, especially the script for like It Follows and a couple of other ones, they they use some, I guess, words that kind of add a bit more to it. I don't want to say novel like because it isn't 100% like, it's not completely against the rules, but it also goes against, some of the things that go, well, be careful when you're saying, like, she senses someone behind her, like that kind of
All right.
using that in an
In
action
something
line would
like
be
that,
incorrect.
you'd ask yourself, what is it that makes her sense the person behind her? Does a shadow grow over the wall behind her? Does a shadow loom over her and cast a shadow over the shadow in front of her? Ask yourself how she's doing it and ask yourself how it's being done visually. Because remember, we're writing in visual mediums in this program. So you want to try to tell the story and create the scenarios in visual ways. So it doesn't need to all be dialogue and whatever. And you don't do magical senses because you don't write in action lines what people are sensing or feeling or what they're thinking because there's no way to convey that to the audience without something physically happening. So that's why the everything is broken up into three things in a script, which is a scene heading, which tells us where it is, dialogue, which tells us what they're saying, and visuals. And the visuals are how we tell the story mainly because we are movie makers and want to make television shows, and it's all about watching a story unfold in front of us. It's not like a book where it's all in our heads, and it's about somebody's perspective and what they're going through and all that. It's a very different type of storytelling than novel writing or short storytelling. You want to focus on the visuals and find a way when you're wanting to write something and wanting to get more into the details that is acceptable, especially in a thriller, because if you're writing a thriller, more than horror is thriller, it's about suspense. It's about building tension and not leaping to the conclusion of it or going straight to the violence. The Going to the violence is what makes it horror. The thriller part of it, that genre, is about the build up to what can be horrific, which is a difference. And different films focus on different aspects of the scare of the dark story that you tell in such films. So you got to make sure you find a way to convey uh, the tension that you are creating and building, but do it
Exactly.
through visuals. Um, because the dialogue isn't going to help in that thing. It's going to be uh, somebody's scattered breath and the breath clouds coming out of the steam coming out of their mouth as it slowly stops and looks down and see her hand rise up where blood covers her hand, steaming in her hand. You know,
Yeah.
something like that. You're telling us what it is without telling us what she feels. We know what she feels based on you know what the actions you see happening. And then the key is that the other reason why you don't tell people what they feel is because different actors would perform things different ways, and it would be certain things would be more natural for some actors to do a certain way, but with other actors, the best way they could do it is a different way that would be most suited to their abilities and their perspective and their version of the character. So we try not to ever micromanage the emotions or what's going on of the actor and them doing their job. We simply are telling them what's physically happening so that they know and what they're saying so that you can turn around and go, okay, now it's up to you, actor. You get to have some leeway. Because if the actor doesn't see ways to insert themselves and their way into it, and it feels like everything's laid out for them and they don't have, nobody wants to do something where they don't have an artistic say in how it's being done if you're an artist. We all want to
Yeah.
contribute something and bring something new. And what gets us the most excited is when we read something and see a way to go beyond the page, go beyond what it looks like it could be, because we get an idea that's even better than what we see. Everybody's job on a film, our job on a film, is to create a scenario on a page that is riveting. Everybody's job that comes after us is to make it even better than the page made it. So if you lock in too tightly what's on the page, there's no room for anybody to do their job and feel like they can bring the A game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. I just, like I said, I've noticed a couple of different scripts, and I completely understand. And for what we're learning, since this would be like a lot of us, like this is our first time doing screenwriting, so you want us to focus 100% on the visual storytelling, because if we don't, then we're gonna create bad habits that we're gonna have, and then someone's gonna get our script a year from now and think we're amateurs. So I get the emphasis on it. I guess I wanted just to kind of ask you, in your opinion, if I was writing an action line where she's feeling like she's being followed by someone, but visually there's not really
There is.
anything there
You could.
yet.
She
How
stops.
do I?
She stops. She suddenly stops. She hears another set of footsteps after two other footsteps, footfalls behind her. She whips around. Nobody's there. You're showing she senses it, but you're showing it through physical action.
Okay.
And then you're giving us clues because she stops walking, but then another two steps are heard behind her. Now you know what she's sensing. You know that she sensed it because she stopped. Not because you said she sensed it, but because she stopped dead in her tracks. You see what I mean? It's through action. You
Yeah.
don't say they sense, you don't say they feel, because we don't know what they feel. You have to show us how we know that they sense. How do we know that they feel? And that is through doing something in the physical world.
Okay.
That's all we have
Got
to
it.
go on. If we can't see it,
Yeah.
how do we know it's like saying this guy's very uptight. How do we know he's uptight? That's too much to leave in the hands of the director and actor. You have to be a little. If he's uptight, he's pacing. He's sitting there, throwing his pencils into the ceiling, and his ceiling is covered in pencils with their tips stuck in the ceiling.
Okay.
That guy's a goof. Another guy is taking pens and throwing them into a dartboard. You know,
Yeah.
you know. What is the person doing that gives us the sense of who they are and what they're feeling and what the edge is that's happening?
Okay.
That story.
Yeah, I mean that's a good way to put it, like how you described writing it, so that, because I guess my concern was I just wanted to make sure the reader of my script wouldn't kind of be like, oh, I don't understand. I just wanted them to understand the story and to feel the suspense and kind of make sure that they feel it,
Right.
because that's what a good suspenseful script should do.
That's
So
right.
I was, yeah.
Yeah, and the key is to not be vague. The problem you run into, the reason why you don't say somebody's sad, you say they're sobbing or they cry or they sit in the corner and bury their head in their hands. Uh, you know, how do we know they're sad? The biggest problem people have with action lines, there are two problems, and it's a double-edged sword. They're either too vague or too detailed. One isn't giving us enough information to understand how we know this by seeing it on the screen. That's vague. The other way is giving so much detail that it's like, dude, I don't need to know the sap that's on the trees. Let's keep going. You got a story to tell. Keep in the conflict. Keep moving the character forward and the conflict forward. If whatever you're writing isn't commenting on the character arc, which is the character flaw and how it changes into how they change, or the physical outer journey, which is what they're physically trying to accomplish in the story. If the scenes don't apply to those two things, then chances are whatever you're doing, you can remove it. It's not necessary.
Okay. Good to know.
Good to know.
Um,
Yeah.
Prof- uh,
Yes.
Professor Tab, I want to ask a question. Okay, if you started off with just one genre, and then as the stories begin to develop, and it starts to add more genre, how do you supposed to know when to put that in there? Because sometimes you start off with drama, and then you're doing so much drama, and then it starts to go into like a fight scene or a romance scene. How would that come about?
Well, you're always in one or two genres the whole time from page one. You don't slowly slide into another genre. Um, you don't change genres mid story. People go to a movie because the genre article talks about this, but audiences have been trained to pick movies not just based on the story, but based on the genre. Do you want to see an action movie? What do you like? Action movies, comedies, romantic comedies, whatever? Do you want to see a drama? People are deciding what to go see and spend money on because you're promising them a certain type of movie. Then, if they go to the movie and then it's not that kind of movie through and through, whether it was a good movie or not, 9 times out of 10, the audience member will not like it because you did not deliver the experience that you promised them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So you want to
Yes,
hold
it.
on to a genre. So, for example, if it's a story, if it's a romantic story, but the protagonist isn't in a romantic relationship at the beginning, then you set the first scene at somebody else's wedding or a wedding shower or helping somebody else through a breakup, some kind of reflection character. Put us in a situation that shows that they're at a wedding. She's a bridesmaid, always a bride. If it's romance, but if it's action, you know then you can start with something that has to deal with creating tension and action, and do something like that. And it doesn't have to be the main action plot, but it has to have a tie to the opening scenes that you establish for the audience on page one. This is the kind of movie you asked for. This is the kind of movie I'm giving you. I am promising you this, and this is what I'm giving you. And a great writer knows how to give people what they promise, and yet at the same time constantly surprise them by doing it with ingenuity and breaking molds and cliches and doing it in ways we haven't seen it before, but holding true to the tone, so that people are still getting the kind of movie they went to the movies to see.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. And of course, you can start. By the way, if it's a drama, you can start it with if the stakes of the film are life and death, you can start it with a funeral. You can start it with a car accident. You can start it with getting news of some bad thing happening, or if it's a coming of age movie, you start it. Because it's about change and growing. Then you start it at something like a graduation or something like that, to give the audience an immediate sense of, wow, this is, if you said this is a coming of age story and you're already at a graduation or something like that, something seminal about coming of age, then we know that you really understand what you're selling. And it makes the reader of your project and the producer much more comfortable with the writer if they know how to deliver from page one the kind of movie they have promised to deliver. So it's really important that you know your genre and that you're able to sustain it throughout the whole script. Now, I will say that there is once in a while a movie that kind of goes from one genre and seems to um, get more serious. It's like building the stakes. Like an example of this, it wasn't a huge hit, but like The World According to Garp, it it stars Robin Williams, and because Robin Williams is innately charming and funny, it starts off with a lighter tone, but it was always dealing with the disappointment about the optimism in life and how it slowly becomes disappointing. Um, but it was always a drama, and there were always dramatic things, and it just slowly and slowly became heavier, just like the building of the stakes in an action film. You can start an action film with a small fight, but in the climax, the action could be running across the Grand Canyon, almost falling off and having to fight 10 men on the edge of the cliff, beyond which anybody would fall if they died, and died painfully. And then they're using guns and stuff, whereas in the beginning it was all fists. And so it's 10 times more, and now he's got no gun and they've got guns, and it builds and builds. It always builds, so the tone will get more intense with the genre. But it is always in the genre. Did I
Okay.
over-explain that?
No, I understand now.
Okay. Hello, Jesse. Welcome to the thing. I see your chat. Does anybody else have any questions?
I don't want to be the only one like that. Does anyone else have any
If you're
other
the
questions?
only one asking questions, you're doing everybody a favor. Sometimes you're in a class and there are a lot of people that are shy. A lot of people take an online class because showing up in person, whether it's something they don't enjoy, they are shy. So if you're somebody who has questions and wants to speak out, everybody else is going to learn from it. So don't hesitate. Take the floor and ask.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right. So, one of my questions I had here was, can a protagonist take a reverse journey?
It's a forward journey.
Meaning, like,
It doesn't have to be
because
a positive journey. An inner journey can be going from uh,
a negative to
yeah, it can be
or a
from a
positive to
positive
negative.
to a negative. He can go from being altruistic to deciding greed is the way to go. That's not a negative journey. It's just a journey. It's still a journey.
Okay.
You can call it
So,
negative because the results are, through your point of view, a negative response. But in the end, it's all a journey. Yes, it can go from positive to it can go from a positive attribute to a negative attribute. Somebody can go from uh, uh, you know overthinking to impetuous, and then being impetuous can get a lot of people killed because he just gets
yeah,
sick of overthinking and everybody questioning him. He goes, "Fine, let's go," and they just do it, and then all of a sudden everybody dies.
sounds like a
And at
great
the end, he
movie.
goes, "Maybe we should have thought this out a little better." And
Yeah.
the other guy goes back, "Shut up."
All right, perfect. Well, yeah, I don't know why for some reason I thought for a second I was like, well, maybe like
That's because
I
most
just
people
want to make
go in
sure
the
like the antagonist, when it but nowadays you have so many anti-heroes, so I guess that does make sense. All right, and I think Jesse had a question in the chat.
Yeah, Jesse. All right. So, can the genre be visualized at turning point? Can it be visualized at turning point one? Uh, it should be visualized from stage one at the very very beginning. You should be when you picking we talk about in the handout on structure how and it's in my new book. Uh, eh, how there are three kinds of crises you open a film with. They're common crises because they're what this character is used to going through. But the idea is you have a crisis, and through that crisis, you're revealing what the protagonist's character flaw is, the thing that will need to change, and how they're going to, what that needs to go through the character arc to change by the end of it. That process we were just talking about. And that crisis should relate directly to the genre you've selected. So if you've picked a thriller, you know, the crisis should be, something suspenseful that happens. If it's name a kind of movie, if it's a horror movie, the crisis could be somebody's gruesome death, or the fact that something happens to somebody that's going to turn them into a gruesome killer. Um, Either way, even before turning point one, you should be hitting your genre hard. Every scene. That's why I have you do a list of genre visuals in both classes when you pick a genre, because whenever you're going to write, you're going to want to look back at this list of images that pertain specifically to your genre, and see if there are ways to visually make each scene a little bit more genre specific, so that when anybody reads it, it's like you're holding them to that fire. You're holding them to that method of storytelling, and you're giving them the visuals to paint the picture so that they feel like they're watching a movie, that they understand how it goes, and that you know what you're doing and you can be trusted. Because the constant execution of genre in a story is one of the ways you show you are a pro.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, awesome. Hello everyone. I'm asking because given the restraint of, for example, like the 10% or the opportunity is really on page one because we're having a 10 page script. So as far as what I have been writing,
Oh, I get
I
you.
work myself into the thriller as far as the pace. The pace starts to build up. The stakes go high really quick. But in that first page, the only thing that I'm thinking about by what you just said is actually, the judge is telling him he's not going to be able to see his son. I'm not sure. Maybe on my standpoint, that's not enough for me to see it as a thriller. But that was more my question, like if it was okay if it was visualized,
You
excuse
know
me,
how
at
you
that
make it a
first turning
thriller?
point.
Well, he's having this conversation. You're showing the other guy and his friends coming into the room in the background. You're revealing they have a gun. They each have guns in their waistbands. And while he's convincing the stage, you're wondering, okay, when is this about to change? You see what I mean?
Okay, got it.
So you can layer the thriller element into it by laying in the suspense of, oh shit, something's about to go down, and he has no idea because his back is to the wall, is to the door where everybody's walking in, and the guns are going to be drawn.
Interesting. Okay. All right. That
Don't
actually just
forget,
gave me
the
an idea.
genre does not have to always be supplied by the protagonist. It's the situation the protagonist is put in.
Yeah, actually, I did see that in all the examples that we've been having, and the Billy the Bully example that you provided.
Yes.
There were two turning points that it looked like the actions weren't really, they were caused by the protagonist on previous turning points,
Right.
but those turning points were actually towards him. So the action wasn't really on the protagonist, if that makes sense. For example, one of the turning points were the kids, they cornered him. So, but the action came from the kids, not the actual protagonist. So
Right.
I usually saw that usually in those turning points, it's something against, it's an action, but it's against actually the protagonist. It's not that the
Right.
protagonist did something.
And it's a result of what the protagonist did, because the protagonist
That's correct.
attacked them. It was the bully that attacked
That's
them.
correct.
He made that choice, and then finally, all the other kids bound together to stand up to him.
Correct.
And that puts him in the worst of all situations. That's the end of Act Two. It's when the protagonist looks like, "Oh, I'm going to fail in my mission today," and usually it's a pretty big mission, and especially in a movie.
Awesome. Okay.
Any other questions?
I do got a question about the love interest. When I read about it, I know that you said that the story does not have to always have a love interest, but as the story is developing, and you say, okay, well, I do want to add a love interest now.
Good.
How can that be added into the story? Because now you already have this developed story. Now you want to add a love interest
That's fun.
toward.
Here's what you do: you look at the protagonist. This is the most important thing. If you don't have a character arc, you don't need a love interest. If your character has a character arc and they have a journey going on, look at what the inner journey is, and then ask yourself, given the genre, given the story, and given the protagonist's inner journey, how is the love interest going to inspire the protagonist to change in that way? That's the love interest's job. Is because the only way people change is through love. Change is too freaking hard otherwise, right? We don't
Oh
change
yeah.
our ways for no good reason. It has to do with something that can affect us deeply, and love is the way. It can be. It doesn't have to be a romantic love. It can be a familial love. It can be a friend love. It can be, but as long as it's something that has tremendous meaning to the protagonist, that's a reason to change. So when you add a love interest, the love interest is the one who is inspiring the protagonist to make the change on the inside, while the antagonist is battling the protagonist in their outer journey and what they're trying to do physically in the movie. So look at what's your protagonist inner journey?
I gotta pull it up. The inner journey is the protagonist's inner journey goes from patient to agitated.
Okay. So, um, patient, agitated is more of a feeling. Um, do you mean like he becomes short fused, like easy to anger?
Yes, like well, he's more of he's patient when he is meditating and everything is going his way, but his inner self is more agitated. Like he goes off the Richter scale. He's because he used to be a junkie. He used
Okay.
and he's used to chaos, but he's trying to
Well,
find.
it doesn't sound like that's a place of patience. I would think that that would that would not be that would if he stems from being a junkie and everything. Um, my concern is that what you're doing is you're covering his mood change as anxiety changes in the situation around him, as opposed to how he needs to change to prove your premise. So let's take it one step further back and ask, what's the premise?
Deep contemplation is a key to finding your peace.
What's the key to finding your peace?
Deep constipation. Deep contemplation.
Contemplation.
Contemplation, yes.
Okay,
Deep
constipation. Constipation is not the key to peace.
Yeah, some of my words doesn't come out as it's spelled.
I
So
understand. Okay. All right. Sorry, but I'm thinking constipation. That's a totally different story. All right. So contemplation. Oh, okay. Contemplation leads to inner peace. So he's going toward peaceful, not away from peaceful. He is not. So at the beginning, he is agitated. He's not at rest. He's at what I always do is I open the window, I look up thesaurus, and then I look up um, uh, peaceful, and then I look at the antonyms, and
Yeah.
and what we find um, is he violent?
no, he's not.
Is he
His antagonist is more violent than him.
is he excitable?
He's more moody than excitable.
All right. So let's say, okay, Moody's good. Moody, he goes from moody to peaceful.
Okay.
Moody, tranquil or peaceful. That's a good one. Now, because he has to find peace. Now that means who is the person that helps him find peace and helps him become less agitated, less moody? Who is it that makes him feel comfortable, and how does he get inspired to be that way? You have a love interest. And then with the love interest, what you're going to do is you're going to go through and try to find at least three ways in which the love interest can physically do something. Because we work in a visual medium, we want the things that people do, the ways that they influence the plot, we want them to be visual, which means they need to be physical. So, what are the things that the love interest will physically do that will get him to be less moody and more peaceful? And start
Well,
making. You can make a list of 10 different things, and then pick the top three and use those.
um,
And that's what the love interest does.
the love interest is more against him than for him.
Well, then it's not a love interest. It's a lust interest, perhaps. Um, the person who's helping him make the arc in the right direction is a love interest. Somebody who's trying to
Oh,
keep them in the wrong frame of mind and looks like they're leading them on the right path, but really in the end they're not. They're inspiring them to try to stay the same way is what we call a lust interest, which is also covered in the love interest article, and it's a character who we think is the love that at least the character wants to be with. They are who they think they should be with, and then by the end of the movie, what they do realize through change, through their inner journey, and sometimes with the help of a love interest, but it doesn't have to be, they realize that that's not how they want to be and they don't belong with this person.
Okay. I'll have to go back and revise some stuff. Okay. Thank you.
Of course, it's my pleasure. That's what I'm here for. That's why I do these sessions. Thank you for showing up. I have a ton of
I
students.
have two format questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. As far as the sound, you know that as far as the Bible, it does say that sound is capitalized, but I've been reading that it's not the norm anymore, as far as in
Yes,
spec.
that's a little dated.
Uh, so as far as for this class though, would you like it? Would you like us to follow the Bible or just not actually capitalize on those words?
I don't mark off for it when people do it or when they don't do it, unless they do it in a way that is incorrect. Like if they capitalize the sound effect, but they capitalize too much, then I'll mark it. If they don't capitalize
Okay.
it, I will sometimes mention you can, but the truth is that I don't mark for or against either way. The truth is you should follow your instincts and what you think the script needs. If it Ask yourself how it looks. It sounds silly, but there's a lot of form and function to formatting. But in the end, it's about how it reads on the page. And sometimes you may realize the page needs a pop because it doesn't, like, if the page is mostly action and you're not getting that breaking up of dialogue in between, for example, where things are broken up that way, you might want to use caps on occasion with the sound effects because it'll break up the monotony of the read and people won't skip paragraphs because they're looking at these things and something's popping here and something's popping there. It's nice to have that. Um, but
Okay.
but if your script has dialogue breaking it up and it's not really an action movie, I sometimes will capitalize sound effects if it's like for movies that have jump scares, because that's when the audience you're smacking the audience upside the head. You're like, oh. So
Okay, makes sense. I mean,
yeah,
it's visual. You would understand it's a sound, but I like it's really not necessary. I just wanted to make sure
it's
that
not necessary.
I didn't have
It's
that.
not necessary.
Okay.
The thing is that
Now, as
sometimes
far
the
as
script has so much
uh-huh.
capitalized that it's distracting that nothing stands out and it all blends together then, and that's bad. So it's
Okay.
about looking at how it looks. Sometimes it boils down to how does the script look on the page aesthetically.
Okay. All right. And the other question practically
One
was
last
with
thing, though. One
the
last thing. Sorry. The other
sure, go
important
ahead.
thing I have to say about that is that either way you go, whether you use the caps or you don't use the caps, you have to be consistent once you've chosen which one you're going to do. You don't get to
Okay,
use
makes sense.
caps in one scene and then the next scene you're not thinking about it or whatever. Make sure you're consistent with the thing you've chosen, because once you set up a format that you're using, it needs to all read like it's all written by the same person and that they're not wishy-washy about things. You need to own what you've chosen. Okay, sorry. Now go ahead.
No, that's a good point. Thank you. And I was just asking as far as like putting the end, would that be part of the format of this assignment, or we can just leave that out
You can
as
leave
far
that.
as the very end? Okay, great, great.
You don't need to put the end. You don't. Most scripts nowadays that are being written, especially movie scripts, don't even use fade in and fade out anymore. Which basically used to be the in the beginning, once upon a time, and the end of a movie script used to be start with fade in and it ended with fade out. A lot of people are leaving that out now too. It's gone the way of the all cap sound effects. Slowly,
It makes sense.
slowly.
Okay, it makes sense. Actually, the first page, I do remember that it stated that you have to write the premise and the log line.
Yes, you wouldn't put
Um,
that in a script
I
for other
chose
people, but I like to have it so I can check it.
okay, so I just formatted it as general and practically put those two there under the general format. Is that okay?
That's
Rather
okay
than
as long
being
as,
in
as long as
action
you
or
put
being a plug
as
line.
long as you put the first slug line in scene heading, that's fine because it will be spaced then. The problem with general is that it doesn't leave spaces between lines, and there's not much use for general. Some people use it for specific things we're not needing them for, honestly. Um, so as long as if those two things are in general, just make sure you have the first slug line in a proper scene heading so that it has space between that and the general.
Yes, it does. It has. I have it correctly formatted that way.
Then you're
Okay,
fine.
thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions? I will give you one more chance to ask me questions. And then I will say,
Hey,
yes, there we go. Hi.
I'm switching over to my phone. I'm running over to an appointment. I had a question about how do you write like if a character is having like a come to Jesus moment, or she's realizing something, and I want to show the audience what she's realizing by painting the scene that, or showing the scene that she's remembering. How do I write that in the script properly formatted?
Are you
Because
talking
I've
about
read a
a
couple
flashback?
of different things.
Are you talking about a flashback?
I guess it would be considered a flashback, yeah.
Then the book does describe how to use a flashback. I like the method that, now, just so you remember, flashback is a very, very complicated thing to use. And it
Yeah, I
has
know.
to, when you use a flashback, if that flashback doesn't result in somebody making a decision based on having that flashback at the end of the flashback, making them do something totally new to get out of the situation or whatever, then you don't need the flashback. Sometimes flashbacks, people say show, don't tell, but the flashback is the one instance where sometimes you're showing the wrong thing. Showing doesn't mean
Yeah.
show how it began, it means show the moment. For example, when in Good Will Hunting, when Will has to show when Will is having his breakthrough, and he finally talks to Sean, his therapist, about the man who beat the hell out of him growing up, his father. Do they flash back to show the beating? Hell no. You don't need to, because that moment, what you're showing is Will letting out how he feels and what it means and how it is with him and how it sat in his soul for all this time and the catharsis he experiences when letting out the truth about what happened to him in his childhood and the acceptance Sean gives him to forgive himself and that he and explaining that you did nothing wrong. They showed that change in Will, him facing his past and his demons. Showing it wasn't showing the beating. That moment was about showing the change in Will to face his past and know he didn't do anything wrong, he didn't deserve it, and he is a good kid. And it gives him permission to be free. You know, it's like when Luke sees in his when he's standing on one hand and the Empire Strikes Back, and he's seeing what's happening to his friends, and he's having visions like Yoda tells him when he's doing the training that you're going to see the past, the future, things long gone, or whatever. And what he sees is his friends going to be tortured in the future. Do they show what's going to happen to them? No. First of all, you don't want to give things away to the audience too early in advance. It's enough to know that they're going to be tortured that piques our interest. You don't need to show it. Two, that moment is about how it affects Luke. We're showing how it's going to change Luke's training from that moment on, and he decides he has to get back in his ship and go after his friends before they're put through extraordinary pain and almost murdered. That's that. So you have to decide what you're showing, not just showing it, but what are you showing? What is the key thing you're showing in the moment? Is it about what she's going through in that moment and how she's changing? Or is it information she's simply using to move into a next moment? If it's a life changing moment that you're talking about, a come to Jesus moment, chances are you don't want a flashback. Chances are you need to have a moment with somebody or something happening, and and you need to be with that character through that moment, and that's showing their change, not cutting to
Like a
some
revelation.
place. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I've seen.
I overtalk sometimes, but I'm a teacher. I like to over explain so I make sure everybody gets it.
Yeah, I've
Oh,
seen that flashbacks are sometimes used just to like fill in blanks, and you can feel when it's like that because it really doesn't make sense.
That's right. And that's why so many executives, they don't like two things in scripts a lot of the time, because they know that a lot of people haven't been trained how to do it right. And that is flashbacks and voiceovers.
Correct. Just to let you know, it's on page 177 of the book if you want to look into the flashback. That's when it starts talking about it.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question. This is not about writing, but
Okay.
you know how some movies are like silent and some movies are loud and actiony and stuff like that. I want to know how do directors or producers put that with the film to make it great? Because sometimes you'll have like movies like Sabrina, and it's like quiet, but it's still a great movie. And then you have Bad Boys, that's like action and everything. I want to know how that is made.
Well, those are choices made not by the writer. I
Okay.
mean, the writer can simply can describe things as muted and quiet and things like that. But the truth is that they played a tone. Sabrina is a romantic story, and romance is often played through the silence, is played through long looks at each other and quiet realizations of how amazing the person is who's beside you. And the key is to not say it because you don't want on the nose dialogue. You don't want to say exactly what your character's feeling, but you create moments of silence and beats of realization when somebody does something meaningful. And in taking that moment, um, a lot of that is the director and the sound designer deciding how something should be played to best execute the mood that the script was written in. So, in a sense, an action film will tend to be more loud, like Bad Boys, and a romantic film may tend to be a lot quieter because it's about what's going on deep inside of us, and for that we have to listen. But action movies are about boom, it's in front of us, it's doing things, it's action, it's external, and it's loud. So it has a lot to do with the tone you choose to write the story in, but then it's out of our hands how loud or how quiet it gets because we have to allow the other artists in the process to do their job. And they decide that working together. And usually the director in a film will be deciding major things and they talk to the writer about story, they talk to the sound engineer about the sound and how they want it to go, and they talk to the cinematographer about the look and how they want it to look and how to play. Because in an action movie, you can have a lot of dark and striking tones, a lot of dark streets with greens and yellows and street lights and neon lights reflecting off the wet streets and stuff like that for a thriller. And then with something romantic, you're probably, or a comedy, you're looking at brighter lights, daytime. You're going to be shooting for parks and situations, that bring spring to mind. You're going to want to hit in a drama. A lot of times, you'll set that during you'll choose visually to set that during fall or winter because things are becoming bare and difficult and harsher. Whereas a romantic comedy, you might set that in spring or summer because it's bright and sunny and warm and feeling. These are all tonal choices, and sound is a big part of it. Lucas said without the soundtrack to Star Wars, he thought the film was going to be a total flop because without that soundtrack, that sound to really give it that extra oomph, to carry it with that Wagnerian style, um, the movie couldn't carry without it. Sound is crucial, but we don't have to worry about how loud or how soft things are going to be. Um, I think the genre really gives us a sense of that anyway, because if you're executing the genre, it's going to fit.
Okay. Oh,
Does that answer your question?
it does.
Okay.
Okay. I do want to go back to the inner journey, so the protagonist, and you said the love interest. Um, I know that you said that the love interest is more of a lust interest. So if
Well, if they're leading them away from their character arc.
okay, you said a person that's helping them. So what if the character, the love interest, like their sibling that pushes them, but is helping them to become more independent? Is that like a love interest?
Well, helping them become independent isn't the character arc.
Okay.
You don't need a character helping them become more independent. You need a character helping them become more at peace. If,
Okay.
if that's the character arc, from moody to peaceful, and you need a story that is about that. That's why you have a premise. The premise is telling you what it's about. It's about a guy who is not at peace, who's probably very agitated and extremely moody. And people get moody, especially if they're hooked on drugs, because they're desperate all the time. Um, and then they slowly become something else. Um, I think that helping someone find their independence and strength can give them more peace because at the beginning your protagonist is going to be out of control because he is controlled by the drugs, by the need for the drugs, by the addiction and the desire to take his people who are doing and addicted to drugs, they do it because it makes them feel something good. And it may be tranquility and peace. He may take drugs just to chill out. That's maybe his modus operandi. But then the minute the drugs start to fade off, he's moody and he's angry and he wants more drugs. He needs to get this feeling of, he needs to try to, he can't control himself. But in helping him to become more independent, maybe you think about it, is guiding him towards independent, helping him be more at peace?
Well, at first it was because the character is a public speaker and something like a protest person, but back then he was a junkie. I feel like he still has that part of him, even though he don't do drugs.
In the first scene of the movie, or is that a backstory?
That's more of a backstory, but he still does
little in the movie. Okay, the inner journey is what they're going through in the movie. You're setting up. It is. Does he? Okay. So he still struggles with it. Does he still want to go back to drugs? Is he like somebody who's been in AA for 20 years and he still struggles not picking up a drink? What's
Yeah.
Okay. So, a situation could be an opening scene for something like that is, he's a successful businessman walking out of City Hall or whatever, and he's walking down the street because City Hall isn't always in a good neighborhood. And there's a halfway house there, or what do they call it? A drug house or whatever. My brain slipped. I have a brain fart going on right now, but you know what I mean.
I do.
And you see him stop and look inside with longing. And then he turns and walks away. Immediately you establish his weakness.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you said about the thriller, you gave me an idea on how to actually introduce it quickly and I think effectively. But I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When I do present the thriller factor, I'm just presenting a close up on the gun. All right. I want the visual to be somebody has a gun, and they have it held closely so nobody else can see it. Now that's one of the characters.
You don't have to show who has it, but you should
That's what
show that it's
that
not
was.
the protagonist, so you know it's behind the protagonist. So you'll.
So if it's
Yeah.
if it's the antagonist, I don't have to mention that's him at that moment, right?
No. You can simply say somebody a thick, large body walks in the door, in street clothes or in a suit or whatever, in all black, a gun sticking out the back of his belt.
Okay.
You don't have to say who it is yet if we don't see who it is.
Exactly. That's the
Dark
okay.
boots walk into the room.
Perfect.
In the back of his pants, stuck in his belt, is a 36 caliber revolver or whatever kind of gun you want it to be, or laser gun or whatever, because it's sci-fi.
Okay.
Whatever.
All right. That's good enough. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You bet. And then you probably would reveal who it is the minute he pulls it out.
Yes, it happens on the next page.
Okay, that's great. You set up the tension, but you might cut back to the gun more than once in that first page just to keep the tension rising. Like the person walking in from the back is walking closer and closer up behind the protagonist. The figure in black. You can call him something like the figure in black or whatever.
In this case, I started it out like that, but given the short time, I cut out everybody getting into the courtroom and everybody's already sitting down just to get right straight into it. So he's already sitting down, so I can just maybe go back and forth as far as the image of him, maybe taking the gun out and then maybe putting it back in, or I'll play with that today before I actually submit.
Don't take something out and then put it back in. You're taking out.
Well,
and you're putting it away. Why not just have him walk in late with two guys, one on either side, or have him walk, or just have him slowly walk in. The door creaks open behind them. as the guy is talking, and a man and a figure in all black steps in, a gun in the back of his trousers. So he literally gets an entrance, not just sitting there.
Makes sense. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, he can enter late, even if the everybody else is already in there. You know,
Correct. Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
of course, it's my pleasure. That's what I'm here for. Anybody else have any questions?
Hey, Professor Tabb, sorry about that. My phone cut out right as you were answering my question.
I am recording this, so if you missed anything, hopefully I answered it and is in the recording.
I got the last part of it. I didn't. I know how to write the flashback. I guess I didn't really present my question correctly. I was running out of my house and like multitasking.
Okay.
But really, I wanted to comment on what you were saying about how you got to make sure you're using it for the right moment.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be not like a flashback in just like, you know, where it's used kind of like, oh, this is just showing you what happened. Like, it's really integral to the story because she's like regaining a memory that she lost. So she's remembering.
Okay, so it is important that we see it because it cues her to do something specific at the end of it.
Exactly. Like, I mean, it's pretty much reveals the whole, like, the twist of the story.
Okay, and the way I like to format those is you're having a scene, and then when she has the flashback, you put on a slug line. The way I like it best is you type out the word flashback, do a space, 2 dashes, another space, and then the regular slug line. Interior,
Okay.
whatever room they're in for the flashback, with the major location, the minor location, and then the day or night.
Okay.
And then I underline the word flashback so people know that the timeline is being broken. I use that for intercut, and I use the underline when I give a specific cutting notice that is important to understand for timeline and visual.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I realize it's a little bit tricky just because I don't want to like lose the reader and like them to think, okay, like what's going on right now, because it really is such an important scene.
That's right.
To the script.
At the end of the flashback, you put one line of description at the end, which is end flashback, period.
Okay.
And you can just do that. Yeah. Or you need to tell us when the flashback ends, though. That's important.
Yeah. All right. Great. Yeah, and that was just I just wanted to clear that up. I was trying to talk, but my audio wasn't working for whatever reason. So.
I'm sorry. Well,
no, it's all good.
I have no reason to be sorry. Dang it.
No, it's just I mean, it's definitely been a challenge to like condense the story down to like 10 pages and to kind of, I guess, make it meaningful, and not just, you know, like I didn't want it to feel rushed. And actually, I wrote you an email. I ended up changing my concept or changing the story to a different story just because I realized I had already written the story that I originally submitted as a full screenplay already, and I just was having too terrible of a time.
The class is very specific about doing something new, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah, so then I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So I went ahead and I changed it all around.
Why would you take a class and then write something that you already wrote?
Yeah, I mean, it was what we had started working on in character creation and development. It's just as soon as that class was over, I just didn't stop working on it.
You actually wrote the script. Oh, great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad.
So your method worked great, by the way. So yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. And just don't forget that all the editing tricks and things that I teach you in this class you can take and apply it now to the complete feature you've written.
I will do for sure.
Especially in week 4, the editing lesson. There's an attachment, my cheat sheet for editing. It's 30.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to that.
I just came out with a book. If I write a second book, if this book does well, that is going to be a lot of what this is all stuff I've known for a decade, and that's all stuff I would cover in the book. That would, I mean, because it's the second most important thing to having a strong foundation is having strong execution and not just execution. It's a presentation of the work.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it's one little thing and it'll throw someone off. I really realize the importance of that.
Yeah. Okay.
How do we get a copy?
Yeah.
You want a copy of what? The editing book?
Your book.
My book? It's called. It just came out. It's released by Routledge, the #1 publisher in America for textbooks. So I got the best publisher I possibly could. I was very happy. They have a division called Focal Press, and they do nothing but film and entertainment style books for Routledge that are textbooks. Mine is called Pre-Writing Your Screenplay, a step-by-step guide to generating stories. So
Where can we get it?
you can get it on Amazon.
Awesome. All right.
If you follow me on Facebook, I have a link to it. Just click on the link; it'll take you right to it. You should see what people are saying about it. It's pretty amazing. I'm pretty blown away by the endorsements I've already got.
I bet.
The writers of the Batman movie, the creator of Big Bang Theory, a lot of people are saying some really amazing. The head senior screenwriting professor at AFI, the head of the screenwriting department at UCLA, they're all giving me glowing reviews on this book.
No, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. No, it's
Congratulations.
thank you too. Okay. Enough about the book. I swore I wasn't going to talk about the books. I mentioned it last time. Okay. I'm just excited about it because it just came out. Okay. So, any other questions whatsoever?
No, okay, giving me all this feedback on my premise and everything. I just think I have to go back and really think. But before I revise and send it to you, before I send it to you, I have to go back and revise because now it's like I'm getting a whole different kind of feedback.
Yeah, well, the more things change, the more understanding we get on what we're looking for.
Okay.
It's like sometimes you have a target of what you want to do, and at first you don't quite see it clearly. And getting that premise figured out, getting to that core, that kernel of what your movie's really about, and what you want to say to the world about it, is you figuring that out as you develop things.
Yeah, I understand that.
Okay, so I want to talk briefly about the assignments that are due this week. We are starting. This week is we're in week 3, right?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Yes.
All right. So in week 3, in character creation and development, you are learning the supporting characters. Make sure all I got to say is you're writing out the 5 major characters and their journeys. So just make sure there's an exact wording on how you're supposed to word each character. Use the wording and follow the instructions on exactly what goes in the blank spots. In parentheses, it explains what you put in there. Remember, it's physical actions for all the supporting characters. Physical actions that will lead the protagonist in the way that character is designed to do. Whether it's an ally, whether it's an antagonist who stops the protagonist, whether it's a love interest who inspires the change inside them, whether it's a mentor who's physically teaching them to be able to accomplish the outer journey. Make sure that they're physical things that you keep your ideas visual for what the character will do. For the other assignment for writing for film and writing for film and animation, you are writing your first draft of a screenplay, a short screenplay that 7 pages is 7 to 8 pages is an ideal length for a short, but having a full 3-act screenplay is another option. Is important to it. So anyway, trying to get it down to 10 pages. You may not get it down to 10 pages this week. I am not grading your actual scripts this week. You're going to get feedback from each other instead. I don't think when somebody writes a first draft of the script, you do not want feedback from somebody like me because it will just depress the hell out of you.
Yeah.
The truth is you have to be in the habit as writers, and I'm trying to train you to do this, to get friends and people you trust, or your comrades or fellow students, to look at your stuff first, get a little information from them, and then go through, edit it based on those notes if you agree with them, and the lessons of editing next week. And next week, at the end of week 4, I grade your final script submission. This week, I'm actually going to be grading the feedback you give each other. So make sure that when I'm looking at your feedback, you are providing all the types of feedback that are required. Some people forget to answer the questions that are supposed to be at the back of the script. I have a list of italicized questions that you need to ask yourself and answer about the person's script you're reading. 2, you have to have at least 3 quality script notes per page of the other person's script. I have never, ever had a script in my class that didn't have 3 rules broken per page easy. And if you're having trouble finding those 3 rules, sneak ahead to next week, go to the editing lesson, download my cheat sheet, and there's 35 pages of ways you can edit it better. And use that when you go through and mark the other script. That's my advice. So make sure at least 3 notes per page for a minimum good grade, and the italicized questions answered thoroughly. And that will be on Sunday, and I will be grading that next week. Now, does anybody have any questions on the assignments? Does anybody have questions on anything?
Are you talking about the script writing for next week or this week?
I'm talking about this week for a different class. I'm talking about the script I'm talking about is for writing for film and animation this week. Next week, you're just writing you're in the character creation class, and you're just writing a simple single scene. And that is all explained next week in your week 4. Okay? All right. I think that's it. Most of the people already checked out. Thank you for coming. I will post this as soon as I can. And I hope I answered every question. I stay until have done that. Elise, do you have any other questions?
No, that's it.
All
I'm kind
right,
of
I did it. All right, you have a great weekend and have some great writing, everybody. I'll talk to you next week.
Professor Tabb, the reason I'm so airy right now because my aunt just died Monday, and I'm trying to catch up with this work. And so I was confused when he said something about the script because I'm thinking like, oh, you was talking about the work group assignment.
I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
All right. Well, do you have any other questions I can help you with before we go? Is there anything I can do?
No.
Okay.
No thanks.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, I'm here if you have questions. Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. You have my cell number. You've called me on it. All the students do. So you know
Okay.
you can reach me if you need me.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Of course. All right. Have a good weekend.
You
Good
too.
luck. Have a better weekend than you had a week.
Yeah.
Bad, right? Right.
Okay.